that's all right.
And Joy, make sure you hit the red button.
Thank you.
Or your mic up.
Everyone received one? All right, thank you. Hello, my name is Joanne Mendy, and I'm a licensed mechanical engineer in private practice with over 40 years experience in the built environment. More importantly, I am a resident of Mundy Township, and I'm here to talk about the proposed mega site development. Thank you for your invitation to speak at this committee oversight hearing. This morning, I will present two subjects. Part one is our grassroots timeline relating to the proposed mega site development. Everyone seems to be curious and interested in a timeline, so this is our perspective. Part two of this presentation will be an overview of a proposed semiconductor chip manufacturing plant in Mundy Township, which I will refer to now as a chip manufacturer. Our grassroots timeline. All of these activities occurred in 2023. On May 25th, a large group of residents packed the fellowship hall at a local church to discuss the proposed mega site and how the group would get organized to oppose the mega site. In late June, several residents formed a group and named themselves the Genesee County Coalition for Clean Water, GCCCW. I will now refer to this as our group. We began to hold public meetings to discuss what the group's goals and objectives were relative to the proposed mega site. On June 13th, several residents attended the Planning Commission meeting to state why they opposed the mega site in the Advanced Manufacturing District and made suggestions to the proposed zoning ordinance amendments to support their opposition. Several residents were in attendance at this meeting. August, our group began to educate the public on the proposed mega site. We canvassed homes in the 3-mile vicinity of the AMD and collected over 1,200 signatures of residents opposed to the mega site. We spent several afternoons on the street corner just opposite the mega site, collecting signatures, distributing yard signs to garner awareness and support. A copy of the petition template is included in your handout. October 3rd, our group met with the Genesee County Drain Commission to question water availability for proposed mega site. Discussions ended as no consumption quantities were identified, as no company had proposed developing the mega site. October 23rd, our group made a formal presentation to the regular Mundy Township Board meeting to educate the residents and the Township Board on the impact of a proposed chip manufacturer in the mega site. The presentation focused on the demographics within the AMD, health and environmental concerns of a chip plant, and with the support of the petition's 1,200 signatures, our group requested a 1-year moratorium on any proposed development to allow time for further information gathering. We knew the petition did not have legal standing. However, the intent was to show the Mundy Township Board increasing opposition of a mega site by the residents and the need for much more information. This presentation is in your handout, and it is also in the website nomegasite.com. In May of 2024, the website nomegasite.com was rebranded and launched. The website contains a wealth of information on typical megasite developments such as EV battery plants and chip plants. In your handout, you've noticed a business card that says No Megasite. On the back of it is a QR code. You can use that QR code to get direct access to the website. And May 22nd, our group met with Chad Young, the Township Manager, the former Township Supervisor, Tanya Keltzler, the Township Consultant, Jason Ball, with Progressive AE, the Township Planning Commission, Danielle Barker, to present the facts about a chip manufacturing plant and to gain insight into how we can work within the rules and regulations of a zoned township community. spring of 2024, after recognizing that 20 companies or institutions within Genesee County had supported a letter the Flint and Genesee Economic Alliance wrote touting the generic benefits of the megasite cited on the FGEA website. A grassroots letter writing effort by the members of our group was initiated. Residents sent letters to the leadership of these entities asking them to rescind their support based on the megasite's negative impact on the community and the environment. A copy of the letter template is also in this handout. June 5th, our group received a letter from Eagle stating that the 2023 request for water testing at 3 Genesee County locations was denied. The request was desired to achieve a baseline data of water qualities prior to any proposed development. This proactive measure underscores the serious intent of our group has in protecting the residents of Mundy Township. The denial of this proactive request is unsettling. June through August, our group made several presentations to some of FGEA's identified 20 supporters of the megasite. To our astonishment, every group we presented to indicated they had no idea that the generic support letter they signed related to a megasite with serious environmental and health concerns. We presented to these entities, twice to the Mott Community College Board of Trustees, to the Genesee County Board of Commissioners, to District 4 Commissioner Brown and other staff, to the Hurley Board of Trustees. In September 2024, our group developed a survey and posted it on our website. A total of 403 responses were obtained in 1 month. Over 80% of the respondents were extremely concerned about the water pollution, environmental, and worker health. 90% of the respondents do not favor an EV battery plant, a solar farm, or a chip plant. That survey is also in your handout and is also found on our website. Although you might think that 437 respondents is a low number for the entire township, our survey achieved a higher response than the township survey regarding the master plan, and our survey did not cost the township a single cent. October 1st, our group met with Mr. Tyler Rossmessler, Director of the FGEA, Joel Fike, the Business Manager, Dr. Brown, Genesee County District 4 Commissioner, as well as other staff to share information regarding the impacts of the chip manufacturing company. Nobody seems to know what a chip manufacturing company does. February 10th, our group presents an overview of the proposed chip manufacturing plant to the regular Mundy Township Board, as several newly elected board members were not aware of our group's findings to date. The intent of this very detailed grassroots timeline is to highlight the significant amount of time and information our group has accumulated to understand the concept and educate the public regarding a proposed chip manufacturing company within the Mundy Township megasite. Your handout contains several pages of information regarding a chip manufacturer overview. We show what the Hemlock chip manufacturing plant looks like in Hemlock, Michigan. We note that that site is 4.8 miles from the center of town. We also note that that megasite is about half the size of Mundy Township's proposed site. Within the proposed megasite, there are 9 subdivisions encompassing over 1,200 homes, 4 manufactured home communities, 1 elementary school, 2 daycare centers. We also talk about the water usage within the chip plant. They use a significant amount of water drawn from local sources like our Great Lakes. This raises concerns about the potential impacts of the water levels. There is a graphic in your handout that shows the percentage of water that is used for processing within a chip plant. We've all talked about toxic chemicals known as PFAS. They're a group of man-made carbon chain atoms that are surrounded by fluorine atoms numbering over 7 million and are everywhere. Due to their strong carbon atom, they never break down and they continue to accumulate. They are and always will be in the land, air, water, and in our bloodstream for generations to come. They are commonly referred to as forever chemicals. If you're familiar with the use of Teflon, those contained PFAS. Teflon is no longer manufactured due to its health hazards. We note that the federal government acknowledges that safety standards for toxic chemicals are outdated and inadequate. Former OSHA Director David Michaels estimates 90% of OSHA's permissible exposure level to date to the industry standards of 1960s are not safe. When we requested the water to be tested at the 3 sites, we wanted to determine what the level of PFAS might be in those areas. We note that the EPA has only developed PFAS safe levels since 2021. They only established guide levels for PFAS in drinking water in March 14th of 2023. The EPA recognizes more data and investigations are necessary. This late date for establishing PFAS in drinking water also underscores the need to reconsider the mega site here in Mundy Township. There are many health concerns about working in or near a chip conductor plant. The Semiconductor Industry Association, or SIA, produced one of the largest reproductive health studies and studied 14 U.S. manufacturing companies. The results of the study indicated that elevated risks for spontaneous miscarriages within the first trimester of pregnancy, irregular menstrual cycles, and fertility problems are present in workers. Children born to female workers found an elevated risk for cancer. Children born to male workers found more than a causal relationship of infanticide due to congenital malformations, especially heart defects. Additionally, there were indications of mutant DNA in the male workers that transferred to their offspring. This information is all cited within the resource tab of the themidwesterner.news website. There are also economic and national security concerns. The demand for semiconductors has caused new materials such as gallium and germanium to be used with little-known EPA safety data. The U.S. has no sizable germanium deposits, so it must import up to 100% of germanium from overseas countries, mostly China. This reality keeps a manufacturing plant subservient to a communist country. We conclude. Our group is a humble group of residents whose energy and quest for facts supersedes our lack of in-depth technical knowledge regarding a chip manufacturer. However, we believe the information we present, and as collected in the nomegasite.com website, represents our group's due diligence and sound understanding of the potential environmental and health hazards from a chip manufacturer that is potentially lacking from the state's support of the megasite. We are concerned that supporters of this project are not making informed decisions, but rather decisions jaded by proposed financial gain. We are concerned about the health hazards and permanent groundwater pollution due to the toxic materials used in semiconductor manufacturing. We are concerned the lack of raw earth materials make the chip manufacturing business unpredictable. We are concerned the influx of H-1B visas will negatively affect the ability of jobs to natural-born U.S. citizens. H-1B visas will likely increase as it will be several years before any one plant is up and running, and the chip manufacturer will propose using their foreign staff for initial startup and subsequent permanent status. It was noted in the letter of intent from Western Digital that it would be 20 years before all 4 chip manufacturing plants were up and running. We are concerned that the destruction of pristine farmland in Mundy Township, these soils continue to produce crops long after research facilities and advanced manufacturing plants become obsolete. We do not need a toxic industry which lacks being monitored or having enforcement to damage our township, our state, and our Great Lakes. We do need informed decisions from our elected officials. We do not need to have taxpayers subsidize companies that have already more than enough sufficient capital to invest in construction of new plants. We do need good jobs for the community to thrive. We do not need jobs that cause serious health concerns or damage our environment. We do need our elected officials to take as much time as our group has taken to determine which developments are safe and appropriate for the state's residents and which developments are not subsidized by the taxpayers for the increased profit of the proposed company. And now we ask our question. What is the path forward after these Senate committee hearings? What are the specific steps that this committee will take with all the information that they have gathered in the past 2 weeks to determine what the outcome will be and how we can protect not only Mundy Township, but townships across the state? I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joanne, for coming in today, and I do believe we have one or two quick questions. We'll start with Vice Chair Green.
It was just some of the pre-stuff you talked about early on with the Eagle testing. Did they give you a reason for denying that testing?
I believe they cited insufficient funds.
So there wasn't enough money to test the water? Is that,
I believe that's what insufficient funds means.
okay, I just
I
considering
can't speak for them, but
how much money went into, what, 259 million to prep the land?
it's a very good
Okay.
question. I would think that, even 0.001% of that would suffice.
Okay, thank you.
Next question from Minority Vice Chair Wagella.
I was, as you were going, you mentioned collecting 1,200 signatures.
Mhm.
Were all of those signatures from Mundy Township residents?
I
Or
believe so,
the
yes.
majority? So that's approximately, just doing the math, like 8%?
Yeah, 8%.
8% of the community? That's a pretty significant amount to collect signatures for, so,
In 1 month time.
in 1 month. Okay. So I just wanted
2
to
months
know.
time, probably.
Thank you.
Basically the summer. Thank you very much.
From your perspective, would you say that the money that is coming into your area is for public purposes or private purposes?
Are you referring to the
For this
$250 million for this project?
Yes.
It sounds like it's being used for a private company.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a private company. I'd take $1 million of that $259 million.
You could do a lot with that.
I could do a lot with that. Might even retire.
All right, thank you, Joanne.
All
Appreciate
right.
your testimony.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Tyler Rossmessler, Executive Director of Flint and Genesee Economic Alliance, for testimony. Looking forward to hearing your perspective.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Cara. Good morning, Majority Vice Chair Green. Good morning, Minority Vice Chair Wagalla and members of the committee. My name is Tyler Rossmessler. I'm the Executive Director of the Flint and Genesee Economic Alliance. We are a private, nonprofit division of the Flint and Genesee Group, and we are the lead economic development organization for Genesee County. Our mission is simple. We exist to spur prosperity for the residents of Genesee County. And we do that by working with companies. We work with small companies. We help them navigate the resources they need to launch, to grow, and to thrive. We work with companies that we call economic multipliers, or companies with location flexibility. Those are companies that could be anywhere in the world but choose to operate in Genesee County. We work with them to make sure they grow and thrive and stay in Genesee County. We also market our community to companies that aren't here yet. We want them to come and invest in our community. It's no secret that Genesee County and Flint area has seen decades of decline. And that has put a strain on our community, has put a strain on our families as we've seen young people move away for jobs and a better life. In 2019, our organization got involved in an effort, no problem. Our organization got involved in an effort called Forward Together. And Forward Together was a county-wide effort to do some strategic planning. We engaged hundreds of stakeholders, and we asked them, what would you like to see our community be in the next 20 years or the next generation? We heard a lot about jobs. We heard a lot about a vibrant economy. And we took that to heart. In 2021, when Ford Motor Company announced that they were going to invest $11 billion and build their next generation vehicle in Kentucky and Tennessee, it sounded pretty familiar to us in Flint and Genesee County. We've seen decades of auto companies going south and taking their jobs and opportunities for young people with them. So when Ford gave their feedback to the state of Michigan, and they said one of the important reasons on why they couldn't do that investment in Michigan was because we did not have large, ready sites that had access to talent and infrastructure, we thought to ourselves, we got talent and infrastructure in Genesee County. Let's see what we can do. So we sprang into action. And we identified a site where we could find 1,000 contiguous acres. And if you'd love a history lesson on why that's really difficult to do in Michigan, I'm very passionate about it, and I'd be happy to tell you about it, but that's not for today. But quickly, by the end of 2022, we had secured control or option agreements on 981 acres. And as a result of the infrastructure that's available in Genesee County, the access to talent, the quality of this site, we were able to secure a large investment from the Strategic Site Readiness Program, which had been created in a response to the Ford investment in Kentucky. And today, we have the best site in America. It's called the Advanced Manufacturing District of Genesee County. It's a roughly 1,300 acre rectangle just south of Flint, Michigan, around the corner, a mile away from Bishop International Airport. It's served by Class A roads. It has adjacent rail. It's within 5 miles of 7 freeway exits on 4 different freeways. It has robust infrastructure from power, gas, and water. And this is, I think, is a differentiator, which is that, you know, in Flint, we're an hour away from places like Saginaw, Lansing, Ann Arbor, and Metro Detroit. And so the labor that is available to work at a site like this in Mundy Township is unmatched. And then you blend that with the infrastructure we have for talent pipeline. 5 minutes from this site, Mott Community College. 5 minutes from this site, University of Michigan Flint. 5 minutes from this site, Kettering University. I like to call the West Point of the auto industry. And then an hour's drive to 3 R1 universities. That's Michigan, Michigan State, Wayne State, all within an hour site. There is no other site in America that can boast those things. And that's why it's the best site in America. And the Advanced Manufacturing District is very important to the state of Michigan's attraction strategy, certainly our attraction strategy. So early in our process, we conducted a scientific poll that commissioned a scientific poll to further understand our community's thoughts about a project like this. Thanks, Nate. The survey among Genesee County residents showed they overwhelmingly support a major manufacturing project in Mundy Township by more than 3 to 1. And residents are supportive because of the potential for good paying jobs and the boost to our local economy. And attracting a world-class employer to this one-of-a-kind site, I believe, will have huge benefits for the state of Michigan and certainly our community locally. But more than that, I think it's incredibly important to the United States. As President Trump is trying to bring back jobs to the United States, making us less reliant on countries like China, sites like this are incredibly important to ensure that those jobs come here to Michigan and don't go to Tennessee or Kentucky. And, you know, everyone in this room, I think, has heard about Project Grit, and that's probably something we want to talk about today. During the COVID-19 pandemic, our country was suffering from a huge shortage of semiconductor chips. The global supply chain was disrupted, and our auto industry was hit incredibly hard. Certainly in Flint, we felt that. Trucks were parked all over the county because they were waiting for chips before they could be shipped out. And it raised concerns about national security and our competitiveness with other countries like China. And that's not just because chips go in our watches and our phones and our cars, but they go in our missiles, they go in our drones, they go in our satellites, and they go in our submarines. And so, Project Grit was involved with one of the companies investigating opportunities on where they might place their next production facility. In the summer of 2022, representatives from the company first came to visit us in the site. We detailed the amazing benefits about doing business in our community and what the site offered. By the end of 2024, it was our understanding that if the company obtained federal incentives, Mundy Township and the AMD would be the next location of their facility. And that would mean, over 20 years, they would invest $63 billion. They would create 9,400 permanent jobs. It would be an absolute game changer for Genesee County and the state of Michigan. Our team continued securing land and working on the site and working with the community for this potential investment. Unfortunately, in July of this year, the company decided that due to federal uncertainty and market conditions, they would not move forward in Michigan. That day, I received a call from an executive at SanDisk, and he told me, "I'm sorry this didn't work out the way we hoped, but I want you to know I've been to over a dozen states and several countries all around the world. You have the best site in America." And of course, we were disappointed, but we remain 100% committed to attracting an advanced manufacturer to this site because we wholeheartedly agree this is the best site in America. And this is evident because since that day, we've continued to get calls from companies all over the country looking for sites of this magnitude. Today, we continue to secure land using funds from the Strategic Site Readiness Program, and we own or have agreements on more than 1,300 acres. We continue to receive interest from locals who are very committed to seeing our community grow. From day one, we have been transparent and fiscally responsible. To keep residents informed, I consistently appear before Mundy Township to provide updates. And you know who really made that happen was Joanne Mendy. And so Joanne has helped provide opportunities for me to be more transparent with Mundy Township. So every other week I appear in front of the Mundy Township Board. And I was just there on Monday. And I've held dozens of stakeholder meetings with residents and business leaders and educators and concerned citizens all about this site. Now, as a private nonprofit, we've signed NDAs. Many times this is required given the highly competitive nature of business. Companies will not discuss opportunities with us unless we agree not to disclose what they tell us. Success in business and in life is not linear, but we are going to be successful because this is the best site in America. This site is going to allow for the creation of thousands of jobs, the investment of billions of dollars, opportunities for our young people, and it's going to bring our supply chain back to the United States. With that, happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony, Tyler. A question I have for you first is you said that this is a large ready site they're looking for. Aren't there a bunch of houses on this site still?
We own 1,300 acres, or we own 1,206 acres. We have options on an additional 101 acres. So of the 2 square miles, like I said, this is a rectangle. 2 square miles is 1,280. And so we own more than the 2 square miles. We own a little bit of property into Mundy Township, into Flint Township.
There's neighborhoods all over in this area, correct?
There is one neighborhood
in an
on
elementary school?
There's one neighborhood on this site, and we have 91% control of that neighborhood. Regarding the school, we have a relationship with Swartz Creek Community Schools. This is the best site in America, and if we think that we can make this site better and provide an opportunity for the school to build a new school at a different location, we are investigating that.
So how's it ready if you'd have to build a new school?
Today, this is the best site in America. It is served by Class A roads, has adjacent rail access. It's within 5 miles of 7 freeway exits. It's got the best talent available in the world, and it's essentially a rectangle.
So displace homeowners, relocate a school, more taxpayer money for all that, but somehow yet this site is ready.
This site is the best site in America.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Vice Chair Green.
Yes, this site is the best site in America. I'm just sorry. Okay, so I remember serving in the military and I was in community college, San Diego Community College, when I was in the Navy. And I was in a sociology class, and I remember watching Roger and Me. So I already know how, not just because of that, but I'm from here, and my sister lives in Flint and Grand Blanc, and my parents, and so I know, I empathize to the area's devastation of having the golden age, the Gilded Era come into this community and then move. So I hope you're also then empathetic to why we believe that there needs to be guardrails around what you claim to be the best site in America. And so, again, a lot of money was invested. I'm going to ask you the same question. You're this big organization the Flint Genesee Economic Alliance. Why did you not pay just to have the water tested?
That's a great question. Thank you for that question. Everything we do is guided by the contract that we have with the Michigan Strategic Fund. And so we can only spend money on what those requirements are. Certainly, if there are testing to be done on properties outside of the site that is defined in our contract, I mean, we would see that to be important, but that we're not able to use the money per our contract.
But your organization itself is an economic development organization, correct?
Correct.
So you would care and invest in that even outside of, you as an organization can do that privately without a dime then from the strategic fund, correct? You can spend money, right? Is that true?
Yeah, we are a private nonprofit that exists to spur the prosperity of Genesee County. And, you know, I believe that we can do both. I think that we can attract an advanced manufacturer to this site and protect our environment, absolutely.
So then how are you, then walk me through that, how you're able then to protect the environment then from this?
Yeah, you know, we follow all the state, local, and federal requirements to the environmental regulators, and I think to date, we have assembled the best site in America following the contract and following those rules.
Okay. You're still not exactly, because I guess when you want to protect a community, and me serving on local government would want to go above and beyond because of knowing the devastation that's already happened to that area due to manufacturing. I mean, you drive by, you visibly can see it. So.
And I felt it, yes.
And so you were planning this mega site, and I guess you call it like the promised land because you spent a ton of money to invest in getting this site ready, though, and I guess here's another question. Was there ever a signed contract that from SanDisk knowing that they were going to build there before this money was invested?
We personally never signed any contract with SanDisk. The LOI that SanDisk signed was not a legally binding document, but that came after the work that we began on the Advanced Manufacturing District.
Okay. And you know, I agree. It seems like you're heavily interested in the economic development of it. But can we come to an agreement that you see why we're concerned about putting guardrails both environmentally and protecting the communities, protecting homes, protecting neighborhoods, protecting elementary schools, because of what has specifically even happened to that area already, how manufacturing has destroyed it?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. I believe that we can do both, that we can grow our economy and that we can protect the environment and the residents of Genesee County who deserve it. You know, I live in Genesee County. I have kids in Genesee County. I certainly want to see the environment protected. I also want to see opportunities for young people. And I think that is obviously the challenge that you all as policymakers have to balance, is how do we do both well?
Thank you.
Given that you said you have the stated goal of the prosperity of Genesee County, do you think it would have been appropriate for the Michigan Strategic Fund to appropriate some of that $250 million towards looking out for the interest of the community and their well-being from an environmental perspective with this project?
I appreciate that question. I think that's a question for your policymaker colleagues and for the Michigan Strategic Fund. What I can say is that with the money, we have been fiscally responsible and very successful in assembling the best site in America.
Okay. And another question, you mentioned in your testimony that there was 3-to-1 support in the community when pitched about the proposal of this type of idea. If I were to go and door knock in your community and talk to the people in the area, do you think I'd get a number close to what you're saying?
Yes.
I think I'll have to do that. Next question from Vice Chair Vigala.
So I have a couple questions, if that's okay, Chair. They kind of are all related, but the first one, you know, I think the term nonprofit is somewhat misleading sometimes, right? Because sometimes we see nonprofits working in the interest of you know, business, right? For example, we have the Michigan Economic Development Foundation in Michigan, which does different work around economic developments, but is funded by Delta and DTE and Blue Cross Blue Shield. So my question for you is, who are the primary donors of your organization?
Yeah, appreciate that question. The Flint and Genesee Group and the Flint and Genesee Group Foundation. Group Foundation is the entity that has the contract with the Michigan Strategic Fund. And Flint and Genesee Group is primarily funded through a lot of different private donors, philanthropic organizations in Genesee County, private donors, companies, businesses that want to see our community grow.
Is that information public?
I'm not 100% sure how it's disclosed, but we don't have any problems.
Like, for example, is Blue Cross Blue Shield or DTE members or
Not
donors?
DTE. Blue Cross Blue Shield has been a sponsor of many different events of ours. I don't know their current level today, but our primarily we're funded through philanthropic dollars.
Are there any, do you get small dollar donations from community members?
No, we would have members.
So here's where I'm going with this, Chair, if I can get a little leeway, is we were talking about Ford earlier in your testimony and talking about how, we're losing companies like Ford to other places because we don't have the sites available. The way I view it, which is I believe the way the majority of people in Michigan would view it, is that a company that made $5.9 billion in net income in 2024, such as Ford, and a company that's paying their CEO $24.9 million a year, should be responsible for assembling their own site and be responsible for funding their own projects. Because who keeps the profits of these companies when they make a profit?
If I'm following your question, who makes the profit when Ford makes the profit?
Yeah.
Their shareholders?
Yeah, do the members of the community make that profit, or is it a private business? So why, I guess, this all comes around to my main question, which is, why is it the public's responsibility to spend Michigan taxpayer dollars to do what private business should do for themselves?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And what I would say is that, what my job is to provide opportunities for our economy to grow, and I take advantage of every opportunity that's presented. And when the state created the Strategic Site Readiness Program, we used that opportunity to advance our local economy, and we've been very successful in creating the best site in America.
And just one final piece here, I just will add, being that the donors are for-profit businesses and the nonprofit is organized to help those for-profit businesses, I would argue the interest of the Flint Genesee Economic Alliance is in the interest of business and not in the interest of working class people.
All right, I have another question about Maple Creek Preserve. Are you running for a board position in the community there?
Not currently running. I'm appointed to the board at that condo association.
You are on the board already?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe there's any conflict of interest with your involvement in this project?
No, we own 71% of the houses in that neighborhood today, and we're
And that's
closing.
within the 1,300 acres
Yes, sir,
of this project that you're advocating for,
of the site.
to displace people away from that community and relocate them?
All I can speak to is what the facts on the ground are today, which is that,
And you have a leadership role in the Maple Creek Preserve?
yes.
Okay. Looks like we have a question from Representative Beerline.
I don't push my button a lot in here. The dollars that were spent to buy property, was that property purchased above, below market rate? I'm just curious how it was spent. Did you have to pay more for those properties because people start to hear that, well, maybe, there's state dollars to buy them?
Yeah, appreciate the question. Certainly, every parcel, every property owner has a unique situation, and we have prided ourselves in trying to be transparent, fair, and relational. And so each deal has a unique circumstance, but in general, these owners are getting above market value.
In the packet that you provided, Tyler, there's the yellow kind of block, and then there's some pieces that are not in yellow, are those the properties that you don't control?
Correct.
In that two, okay. Where's the school?
It's the northeast corner.
That
10
northeast
acres.
corner? Okay,
Here.
okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Tyler. I appreciate you coming in and sharing your testimony today. I know we did ask you a few difficult questions, but as always, we want to give the opportunity for people to share their perspective from all sides of the aisle on these issues. Like the MEDC, who does consistently come in here, and we ask them to. Certainly appreciate you taking the time to come
Thanks
in
for
as
your time.
well. And to further elaborate on that, we have requested, invited people from the community, residents who are in opposition to this project. We have not yet invited residents from the community, business leaders, people of that sort to come and testify. I would love to have that conversation with them if they want to come in here and talk about this. I would absolutely love to do that. We did try to do that with the Marshall Mega Site. We had people come in and say how they were opposed. So many people wanted to testify, but we wanted to keep it narrow so we could focus on other conversations as well. And then there were media reports about how, well, they only had people from the community come in opposition. They didn't have people come in support. And I saw those media reports, and I'm thinking, well, we had dozens, 100 business leaders and community people who say they were in support. I was like, you know what, we'll reach out to all of them, invite all of them to come in and testify. We had one individual who committed to come in and testify in support of the Marshall Mega Site, and then he did have a family situation that came up where he was unable to come in. So we ended up with nobody in that situation. I could put out that option. All community people who want to come and say why they're supportive of this project from the community, come in here. We'll hear your testimony. We'll ask you questions like we do with Tyler, or like we will with the MEDC. I would love to do that. I just don't think we're going to get a whole lot more than crickets if we do that. So that's that. Just want to do that little bit of housekeeping before we get on to our next agenda item, which will be Mr. Quentin Messer, CEO of the MEDC, and Kristen Armstrong, COO of the MEDC, for further testimony. Again, thank you for consistently being responsive and coming in and having the conversations with the committee.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Carr, and thank you, Vice Chair Regula. And to the other members of the committee, we appreciate your continuing to answer the call to public service. We look forward to discussing Team Michigan's efforts to support development at the Advanced Manufacturing District of Genesee County and our work alongside local officials and legislators alike to secure a transformational project in Mundy Township. Before I begin, I want to orient ourselves and get alignment on the fact base. This opportunity at the Advanced Manufacturing District of Genesee County is a result of the creation of the Strategic Outreach and Reserve Fund by the legislature in December of 2021 with strong bipartisan support. The fund was created within the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity as a reserve fund to hold assets and state appropriations. This also falls squarely in line with the Strategic Fund Act, which in Section 88 declares that our efforts to encourage the diversification of the economy and the creation of public jobs are a public purpose and of paramount concern to the interests of our fellow Michiganders. When it comes to the sewer fund specifically, projects or developments may only receive support following public consideration and approval from the bipartisan and bicamerally appointed Michigan Strategic Fund Board. Once approved by that Michigan Strategic Fund Board, a legislative transfer memo is sent to the sent to the Senate and House fiscal agencies for review, and a transfer request is submitted to the appropriations subcommittees of both houses for approval. This highlights which is arguably the most important step in the SOAR process, which is that money can only be expended from the SOAR fund through legislative transfer and approval, ensuring that all of you in the House and your colleagues in the Senate are critical partners in the process to secure these transformational opportunities for Michigan. I also want to say that it's very important to ensure that we're executing Michigan's economic development strategy, the Make It in Michigan economic development strategy, in alignment with whatever federal industrial policy is. And I will discuss this further in the presentation. Next slide. So I want to talk about the two components of SOAR. There are two components. First, the critical industry program. It's performance-based, reimbursable performance grant agreements. And by performance reimbursable, I mean performance must occur prior to any grant funds being received by any entity. The large part of the conversation today will focus on the Strategic Site Readiness Fund. The Strategic Site Readiness Fund, which was the fund that was used in order to provide the funding to develop the Advanced Manufacturing District of Genesee County, provides grants, loans, and other economic assistance to help local partners and communities develop investment-ready sites to attract and promote new opportunities in the state. One of the reasons why we had to expend such a large amount of money, candidly, Michigan was behind many, not only of our fellow U.S. states, but also Mexican states and Canadian provinces in the competition for large advanced manufacturing sites because we had not invested in site development. This Strategic Site Readiness Program helps us attract and spur new business growth in Michigan. In creating the Michigan Strategic Site Readiness Program, or MSSRP, as part of the SOAR package, this body, and by this body I mean the legislature, overwhelmingly recognized the need for proactive site readiness investments and creating a diverse portfolio of ready sites, including large-scale sites. The SSRP, or Strategic Site Readiness Program, provides a detailed plan and regime for strategic investments in site readiness. So let's talk specifically about the Advanced Manufacturing District of Genesee County. The overlay district, as we've heard, went through the normal public approvals and concluded in February of 2023, and wisely, on the part of the community, set specific parameters to ensure any kind of development fell within a certain scope and met a certain standard. In fact, the stated purpose of the Advanced Manufacturing Overlay District is to provide an environment where high-tech uses and functions can be located to ensure job creation and approximate growth in the portions of the township where access to necessary public facilities and in close proximity to transportation assets. In other words, the community has taken steps to proactively guarantee that the community's vision and intent for this land will be maintained over the years as new opportunities come to fruition. Today, the Advanced Manufacturing District is one of the premier 100-plus acre greenfield sites in the country, I would argue in North America, as a result of the investment and work that has been done to date, led by the Flint and Genesee Economic Alliance, who you heard from its leader earlier, with strong support from the local community. All of the site prep has happened in just 3 years, while many of our peer states and provinces have spent decades, in some cases, to assemble their own similar large sites. For example, in Tennessee, the site of Ford's eventual Blue Oval campus was marketed and prepared for 15 years before securing Ford's Blue Oval investment. In Georgia, the state of Georgia put together its first site to become the eventual home of Hyundai's facility back in 2015 before landing that Hyundai site 7 years later in 2022. In Kentucky, Ford's SK battery plant was acquired in multiple pieces occurring over a 20-year period through state or Commonwealth of Kentucky funding. The topic of MDAs has come up, as it has come up during this hearing. We have said all along that we are always seeking to get better, and we have applied and learned from past transformational opportunities as we've amended our reports moving forward. To that end, as has been stated previously, we have worked to secure this opportunity for the state. We've also adapted our process to ensure anyone, whether him, her, or them, have an NDA or not, to learn about what is at stake and the kind of opportunity we are pursuing. Though there were still those who signed NDAs and therefore got full access to non-public information that a publicly traded company would not share otherwise, we did as such provide information so that we could be flexible in meeting people where they were, like the township supervisor and others, so that we could inform them about the opportunity at the Advanced Manufacturing District and have a chance to answer questions and learn more along the way. I'll now turn it over to Kristen Armstrong, MEDC's Chief Operation and Performance Officer.
Thanks, Quinn. Good morning, everybody. We're going to take a minute here to walk through the financial support that's provided to the AMD over the years, going back, starting in 2022, to help prepare the site for a future end user, that was initially done through the Michigan Strategic Funds Build Ready Site program. That is the precursor to the Strategic Site Readiness Program, or SSRP. We started in 2019, that program, Build Ready, started in 2019 as a site certification program that allowed us to review sites, the level of readiness at a sites, and to support some early work to understand how those sites could be more investment ready. However, given the limitations of that program and the scale and the dollar amounts needed to actually move a site forward to readiness, the Strategic Site Readiness Program was really a critical program necessary to develop large-scale sites and to make them ready for large transformational projects, those with significant investment, significant job creations. So in the last 3 years, we've done a lot of work with the group. The most recent dollar amounts there you can see under the Strategic Site Readiness Program dollars are 2 SSRP grants. One is a $9.25 million grant. That funding was from a supplemental budget approved in fall of 2022 that allocated about $350 million for proactive site development. So that 9.25 was out of the bucket. That was for site development work with no end user identified. The $250 million grant was approved last May in 2024. This was to really execute on the land acquisition and preliminary prep. Again, this is no end user. This was done well before we had any indication from the company that Michigan was the final candidate in the U.S. That is ongoing right now from the get-go. That grant had a 3-year grant term. So Representative Carr, you've been asking, are we done yet? You've been talking about the activity on the site. We're not. There's a lot of work that remains to be done. We have $192.1 million of that has been dispersed to the Flint Genesee Group Foundation. That money sits in an account that the MSF has a security interest in. That money can only be spent when we say it can be spent on the closings. Through the land acquisition, the Michigan Strategic Fund also maintains a grant of rights agreement on all of the acquisitions. That means that land cannot be sold without the state's consent. Go ahead to the next slide, sorry. Back to you, Quinn.
Thank you, Kristen. Let me walk through and get alignment on the fact base regarding the SanDisk project. As has been stated previously, in 2022, Team Michigan began working alongside the MEDC, worked alongside the Flint and Genesee Economic Alliance to attract an investment from SanDisk, at the time doing business as Western Digital, to build 4 semiconductor fabrication sites at the Advanced Manufacturing District. This project easily would have been the largest investment opportunity in Michigan's history, and would have taken 20 years in order to complete to fruition. It would have delivered $63 billion in private capital investment, created over 7,400 badged SanDisk jobs, 2,000 on-site full-time contractor jobs, and up to 5,000 on-site construction jobs. And we would have been able to access $16 billion in Michigan federal taxpayer dollars through the CHIPS and Science Act. I want to say parenthetically that Michigan taxpayers send more money to the federal government than it gets back. This was an opportunity for us, through a competitive process through the Department of Commerce, to get back those dollars that we send to Washington. I can say with confidence that Team Michigan came together to present the most compelling site, the most competitive business case, and the strongest community impact partnership in the entire U.S. Kristen will talk later about the community impact of this prospective investment. While economic factors outside of the state's control ultimately proved insurmountable to the project moving forward in U.S., we're proud of the tremendous work that resulted in Genesee County being preferred and the final U.S. location for what would have been a generational semiconductor fab investment. So we've talked a lot about semiconductor fabs, but one of the things I said earlier was we need to make sure that Michigan's economic development strategy aligns with federal industrial policy. We can see, as has been discussed earlier, the centrality of semiconductors to modern commerce, especially in advanced manufacturing. You heard Tyler talk about a number of trucks that were, during the tragedy of the pandemic, that could not go to dealer lots because they didn't have semiconductor chips. These headlines indicate the continued focus by President Trump in his current administration that began in his first administration. I might remind folks that the CHIPS office was created by President Trump in his first administration. And this shows the ongoing focus, wisely, of President Trump on this important part of making sure that modern commerce happens in America and making sure that American companies and, more importantly, Americans are not at a disadvantage when chips are primarily made and manufactured outside of the U.S. There will continue to be major announcements about how the chips industry is evolving here in the U.S., and we want to see those investments, those federal tax dollars being pulled down right here in Michigan. I'll turn it back over to Kristen to talk about the regional benefits.
Thanks, Ben. The significance of this opportunity cannot be overstated. This was a really tangible way to diversify the state's economy and provide opportunity for economic prosperity for all residents. A large semiconductor investment would have been transformational for both economic growth across Michigan and the revitalization of the Flint-Genesee County region. Beyond the project's staggering figures on its own, it would have supported 31,000 direct, indirect, and induced jobs throughout the state, while adding $4 billion to the state's overall GDP. All regions of the state would have stood to benefit from this investment in different ways. Southeast Michigan would receive direct investment in jobs, infrastructure, community services. West Michigan would have seen some experience of revitalization of some legacy manufacturing sites through the growth of a new supply chain. Central Michigan and the Thumb region would tap into new workforce opportunities through training programs going online. Northern Michigan would have increased tourism and small business growth along with more investment in renewable sources. And the UP would have had an enhanced tech ecosystem along with an increase in tourism and small business growth. We worked very diligently with the company and local community to ensure a strong community benefits agreement would be in place, meaning that the company would make additional investment beyond just its capital investment on this project to support a number of areas that were important to the region. There's a number of them here. We'll highlight a couple. This includes support for efforts to reduce or make no-cost childcare accessible for Genesee County residents, improving nearby housing stock, supporting public infrastructure expansions to bolster parks, art amenities, and wellness for the community, and providing funds to enhance public safety before the company's pilot or payment in lieu of taxes benefits would have been available, which I'll speak on in a moment. This would have been a $10 million contribution annually from the company to the community for these activities. In addition to, that was straight payments to the community in addition to all the investment they were making at the site.
Sorry, Kristen, I missed. How much money did you say?
$10 million a year for 50 years was
Okay.
the community benefits.
All right, thank you.
package.
Do you see that more as philanthropy when this money would be given, or do you see that more as a bribe to the community because you have hundreds of millions, billions of dollars coming in, and then you just give a little bit back to the community. Can you say that that's philanthropy if this isn't a free market decision, if you're using taxpayer resources to give it back to some taxpayers a little bit?
I would not call that a bribe. I would call that trying to be a good corporate citizen. They want to live and work in these communities too, and want to build goodwill with the communities.
So get the billions and then give some of it back to the community, peanuts back to the community to try to get goodwill with the community who clearly doesn't want it.
This was not going to be payment of state funds back to the state. This was different funding. The state funding on this incentive would have sort of...
But funds are fungible, and if the company gets all of this financial benefit and then they trickle it back to the community out of the kindness of their heart, they're using it off of their taxpayer advantage that they have over the rest of society.
Well, I would say, I mean, obviously, we want to be sensitive to time. I'm happy to address that later because I would argue that Michigan has been transformed by the success of companies that have later created large foundations that have transformed not only American society but global society, whether it be the Ford Foundation or the Kresge Foundation or the Davison Foundation or the Ralph Wilson Foundation. Companies that have been successful, have had excess profits, have reinvested in their community. In this case, as part of the opportunity that the company was exploring, they were willing to make this annual investment over 50 years, which would have been $500 million that could have been leveraged also with current investment in the community.
Right, and I'll let you get back to your testimony here in just a quick moment, but I guess where we see a difference is I see if there's a free market, successful company, and then they have extra money they want to give back to the community, that's a beautiful and wonderful thing. But when they have all this excess money because these special deals they get, and then they trickle some of it into the community who's frustrated with the fact that they're getting these special deals, whether it's environmental concerns or financial concerns, those are two very different things, and I think it misses all the economic output and productivity society could have had we not used taxpayer dollars for the specific private interest for the one company. With that, I'll turn it back to you to finish your testimony.
The next slide, yep. So we want to walk you through too here the proposed offer that was on the table for this project. Given the tremendous scope and scale of the project, it required a unique incentive proposal on behalf of the state of Michigan. I just want to make sure everybody understands no dollars, there was never a signed agreement, we did not disperse any dollars, this did not go through any approvals. This was all very, very preliminary to a very public, long approval process that we anticipated going through. All incentives were to be performance-based, had to be earned. And these are not, the moment we sign is not when the dollars go out the door. There were various elements at play in our overall offer to Sandus, though it's important to note that only 14% of the offer would have been actual cash. Again, this was performance-based cash. There was a CIP grant for job creation investment milestones. You can also see a workforce development grant that would have gone either to the company or a combination of company and other entities that would have provided workforce development and training. The SSRP grant was intended to support public infrastructure. Unlikely that would not have gone to the company, that would have gone through local, probably road commission, drain commission, entities that needed to make some infrastructure upgrades to support the overall process. The other 86% represented non-cash, revenue-neutral support that also relied on performance before the company could earn any tangible benefit. What I think is important for you all to note on this is not anything that the MSF could have done alone. Each one of these incentives required either legislative approval and support or local approval and support. So I just want to make abundantly clear we can't go it alone on this, and we knew we needed support from our legislative partners and our local partners for this to be a success. 6 of the 8 tools would have required legislative approval, meaning this body would have been involved in publicly reviewing and voting in favor or against the project. Some of these would have required new legislative tools. We would have had to come through a very public process to get the legislative tools in place. We were very intentional, knowing this, to provide briefings to members of both the House and Senate along the way, whether they had an NDA or not. The other 2 incentive offers that you can see on the table, a Renaissance Zone and a PA 198, would have required local approval at both the township and the county level. We didn't take that for granted. We knew that was going to be a hard lift, and we had briefings with township officials both before they dissolved the NDA and after they dissolved the NDA, and also with county officials. Legislative and local support were going to be critical to making this project happen.
Thank you, Kristen. I want to continue to set the context about the rationale, the research-based rationale for the proposal that we made to the company. First, as Kristen has stressed, all incentives were performance reimbursable, which means, again, the performance must occur prior to any grant dollars being received by Sandus. I think the reason why we want to look at and provide you with comparable incentives in the same industry was to contextualize the fact that Team Michigan was fiscally prudent. If you look at the column, the second from the end on the right, incentive as a percentage of investment, you will see that what Michigan proposed was well in line on the lower side of a project in the same sector. These are large, capital-intensive facilities. That's why they have so much of a tremendous job impact, and wanted to make sure that I called attention that the incentive as a percentage, 6 to 8%. So I want to emphasize, our incentive offer, Team Michigan, which you would have ultimately had to legislatively approve, was 30% lower than what Indiana provided to a similar emerging semiconductor industry projects, and on par with what Ohio provided for similar projects. It was 15% lower than packages offered by the states of New York and Texas for similar projects. And our community benefits agreement was 5% higher than all other comparable states with similar projects except for the state of North Carolina. Overall, the proposed incentive package was developed in partnership with our local partners, community leaders, and others across Team Michigan, and was in line with the market and would have supported both the company and community and afforded them community and company benefits. We will conclude our presentation. As always, I thank you for your time, your continued public service, and will answer any questions. I also want to say parenthetically, we will continue to aggressively tell the story of the Advanced Manufacturing District of Genesee County. It is one of the premier sites. There's still work, as Kristen and Tyler have acknowledged, to be done, but we are already fielding inquiries from companies about that site, and we can continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you both for your testimony. I do want to start with a comment you made during your opening written testimony, Mr. Messer, regarding all of us having legislative review over these projects. And then a couple times as well, you both mentioned about legislative process. That's for the the SSRP and the CIP funding. It doesn't go to all of us. It goes to the House Appropriations and the Senate Appropriations Committee. So I don't serve on those committees. So I do not have a legislative oversight of that. The full body does not have a legislative oversight of that. Two groups within us have oversight. That is a distinguishment that I think is important to make sure. And I know I'm not perfect either, but in the written testimony, it is not all of us. It's some of us. Is that correct?
As to the transfer process, you're correct. So if we come before you to ask for a transfer approval on a CIP grant or an SSRP grant, that goes through the Appropriations Committee. However, appropriations into the SOAR fund require the full legislature to act, as did enactment of the programs that authorize these activities.
Okay. And while we're on that topic, there was $250 million that's already been approved. That was last term. It got through the House and it got through the Senate Appropriations Committees. But we saw this proposal of $6.24 billion, and I see you have some of that on that most recent slide you showed us there. Can you go through the CIP proposal, the SSRP proposal,
Sure.
what those numbers were?
This slide you're talking?
Yeah, how do
Yep.
you get to 6.24 billion?
Yeah, you bet. So I'll just run down this list here. So the SSRP grant would have been $750 million. Let me just get to my document here. I have it handy. The CIP grant for job creation and capital investment would have been, forgive me, I'm flipping through my paper Let me make sure I use the right number. $1.175 billion over 10 years with performance milestones along the way. And then the $250 million workforce grant, that CIP grant, would have been over 12 years, and that would have been used for workforce development activities. Let me do the programs that exist in statute today. There was a Renaissance zone that would have included a pilot for the county and the township, a payment in lieu of taxes arrangements with the county and the township. The township would have had the opportunity to approve or deny a PA 198 abatement, which would have been a tax abatement. There were 3 potential incentives that would have required the full legislature to adopt legislation. That would have been a sales and use tax exemption, a investment tax credit that would have been worth 5% of its capital investment over 23 years, and then a withholding tax capture, which would have turned on in 2035 had they hit certain jobs and investment thresholds, and would have continued for 30 years from there.
Okay, thank you for breaking down those numbers for us. I'll turn it over to Minority Vice Chair Wagella for a question.
First off, thanks for being here. Thanks for sending me the revenue report. I know I requested it just yesterday, and I got it this morning. I haven't had a chance to read through it all, but I just sincerely appreciate being provided it. Wanting to just go over the numbers first, and then I have a couple questions. This will be the only time I think I ask questions, Chair, if I can have a little bit of leeway. 260 or so million for site readiness, 6.24 billion for state incentives. You know, we kind of just went through those. Then we're looking at a number for local tax abatements. For the local tax abatements, that I haven't seen that estimated, but I know for the Micron offer, it was around 23 billion. Is it safe to estimate that it's somewhere in that range?
It would be less than that. We understand the taxes generated at the township level, for example, on this site right now, I believe are about approximately $170,000 per year right now. So it would abate those and would replace those with a pilot or a payment in lieu of, where the company would have made a negotiated revenue payment.
Is like 15 or something like a fair estimate? Just
I would say approximately 18.
18?
Over the full life of the zone.
Okay, and then we're looking at additionally $16 billion from the federal government.
Between cash and credits from the federal government, yeah.
So the totality of that, for people wondering, is $40 billion. That's approximately half of a state budget for a year. That is, if they're investing $63 billion, we're paying $40 billion for them. So I just want to put that out there. But I want to hyper fixate really quickly on the $6 billion of state offers, because I have my question at the end of this is going to be, you know, do you really believe this is the best investment for Michigan? So $6 billion, what we could have done instead, we could have provided universal child care in Michigan. We could have bought every single homeless person in the state a house at $180,000 each. We could have spent it on our $3.9 billion annual shortfall to fix roads and bridges. We could have done about approximately 3 years of federal road funding. We could have used it to fill the $1.1 billion hole in the big beautiful bill for SNAP and Medicaid. We could have given every resident of Mundy Township $400,000. We could have done things with free college and tuition. And lastly, we could have bought the Detroit Lions. So my question is, how is this the right investment to make for the state and for the people of Michigan when there are so many other needs and so many other things that we could do? We have a $4.5 billion a year public school education gap, according to certain research. I cannot look at this in any kind of sensible and logical way and understand why we are going out there and doing all of this work to give Michigan's hard taxpayer dollars to a private business and essentially making the investment for them.
Yeah, let me, if I may, Mr. Vice Chair, take that question. You referenced the Detroit Lions. I'm a sports fanatic, so I get to use a sports analogy. On a sports team, a football team, every position group has a role to play. Our role at the MEDC, working with local partners like the Flint Genesee Economic Alliance, is to do the best possible thing we can to make Michigan as attractive for inbound investment, as well as current risk-taking entrepreneurs here in Michigan, for them to invest his or her or their dollars in Michigan. That's our responsibility. The responsibility of this, whether it's the Appropriations Committee in both houses or the Oversight Committee, is to determine, once we provide these opportunities, whether or not you will fund them. As Kristen has stated, and as I will underscore, the decision ultimately would have been the legislators to decide whether or not this would have been something that would have occurred. Our responsibility was to provide the legislature with as many bites of the apple to decide what's the best possible use for state dollars. Those are policy decisions. Our responsibility is to play offense, to create as many opportunities for private investment for Team Michigan as possible. Ultimately, it will be decided by policymakers whether or not the appropriate thing to do.
Just respectfully, I think the way we could play offense is making sure that every kid is fed, every person is housed, everyone has great public schools. It's not giving our tax dollars to the richest people in the world, the people who own the shares of these companies and are the CEOs and are the corporations. I think that is not radical take. I think that is a regular take from a working class person here, but I will cede my time here.
I have a certain level of understanding that the buck stops with the legislature. We're the ones who make these decisions. We're the ones who decide whether to fund MSF and or the MEDC. It's not the private company's final decision whether or not they get a corporate handout, taxpayer-funded assistance. It's on us. And to a certain extent, it is not your final decision either. We created you. And to that extent, should we have created you?
I would say, ultimately, that is for the legislature. I strongly believe that it is in the best interest of Michiganders to have a state economic development organization that has and executes a state economic development strategy. We're spending a lot of time talking about the Advanced Manufacturing District, but I can tell you this represents but 10% of the entire body of work done by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, along with partners like the Flint Genesee Economic Alliance. We are focused on small business growth and development. We provide community revitalization projects. We do match on Main projects. We fund small business development centers. We work to try to make sure that there are apprenticeship programs and make it easier for companies to avail themselves of talent services. That's why we're executing a holistic Make It in Michigan economic development strategy focused on people, places, and projects. So I would say, unapologetically, the answer is yes, but ultimately, whatever happens to the MEDC, whatever happens from an economic development is ultimately in the domain of the elected officials.
Yes, thank you. To the numbers quickly with the $16 billion in federal money. I just did rough crunching numbers. That's around $400 million in Michigan money that would go to the federal government and be coming back. So adding that to the $6.2 billion, we're up to about $6.6 billion by that point. So that's a sizable uptick in state of Michigan taxpayer money when you just look at the federal money coming back that originally came from Michigan. Normally we think of federal money in many ways as, well, it's basically free money is the way a lot of people look at it oftentimes because the other 49 states are doing it, so we should do it too. And it's this dog-eat-dog system that's corrupt that redistributes wealth from the taxpayers to the politically connected, not only in our state, but throughout our nation. And it's costing us $400 million in federal money from the state of Michigan, taxpayer money to the federal government. On top of the $15.6 billion we're stealing from taxpayers around the nation. On top of the other $6.24 billion we're stealing from the people of Michigan. For this one private purpose, according to Chad Young, who's the township manager in Mundy Township, he said it's undeniable that you can have a plain text reading. It seems very clear to him that this is for a private purpose, not for a public purpose. And if this was for a public purpose, you would think the township backing this decision, but that's simply not the case. I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Green for next question.
So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do want to thank you for coming. It was pretty bold of you. We've had to subpoena a lot of other people, and so I do appreciate that you came and you presented and you took into consideration the residents of Michigan to have this open. So I do genuinely thank you. And I served on EDC for the city of Richmond for 19 years. So I have a smaller level of understanding of the economic development. I do have a few questions though with that. Again, considering the nature and the sensitivity of the Flint area concerning water, and we also have a Superfund site leaching into the Flint headwaters, why was nobody, when they just asked to be tested, why could that not have been, that just couldn't have happened?
Honestly, that's the first I've heard about this testing issue, so I'm going to dig into that myself, and we can follow up with you on that. But I do want to just highlight, part of the assembly work here is understanding the nature of the site as it was. All the parcels that are being assembled as part of this, we do some environmental baseline and other. When we get to an end user, they have to run all the traps on the environmental permitting process and analysis process. There would have been a lot of testing. There would have been a lot of permit, applications and back and forth with our regulatory agencies. In addition, and through our conversations with Supervisor State and other members of the board, we know and understand environmental monitoring was going to be a very big component of any project that comes here. That is an expectation we are putting out with any company that's coming to look at this site. You will be expected to do heavy and strong environmental monitoring to make sure whatever you are doing does not cause, undue harm in a community that has experienced that in the past.
Thank you. That's reassuring to hear. So pivoting a little bit now, though, that given the withdrawal of SanDisk, so how do you plan to demonstrate the return on investment for that $259 million, the taxpayer investment, to the local to the locals, to us, to the state?
Yeah, sure. I'll take a first crack at that. Thanks, Kristen. Thank you, Madam Representative. As I've said before, in my testimony, the return on investment will be because we are actively marketing the best site in North America. I gave you three illustrative examples that we believe that the grit and persistence that's been the character of Michiganders will allow us to be successful. I said previously, in Tennessee, the announcement that was made for the Blue Oval campus didn't just happen overnight. That was after 15 years of assembly of a similar large site by the citizens of Tennessee. In Georgia, they, over a 7-year period, put the site together. And by the way, in the state of Georgia, all sites are owned by the state. It took them 7 years for a site to eventually land a Hyundai facility. And in Kentucky, they had a site that was acquired in multiple pieces over a 20-plus year period before Ford's SK battery plant. So the answer is we will continue to field not only incoming calls, but aggressively move to make sure that people are aware, in conjunction with the local communities, of the type of opportunity.
So are there current points of interest right now? Has anybody
Absolutely.
bid a little bit? Okay,
On a
so
daily basis.
that's encouraging. Okay, so that's really encouraging. Another question would be, do you also ever consider alternatives, smaller scale, more phased in development? Just considering the area, like I drive by this quite frequently, and there's a lot of old manufacturing sites. And I guess that's one thing that I would look into is that, I know we have that redevelopment, brownfield sites and stuff, but there's a lot of old plants. Have we ever considered redeveloping them as well instead of, because I look at that beautiful picture of the farmland, and that is really hard to swallow that will be wiped off and turned into another site again. So,
Yes, let me begin, and then obviously Kristen can comment. Our first pitch to any company is to look at and redevelop brownfield sites. That's for every pitch. We have, as you mentioned, because we are older, we were the nation's leader and still remain the nation's leader in advanced tech and deep tech. We have a lot of brownfield sites. We always pitch those first. But I use the analogy Some people are willing to buy a house and rehab it. Some people like new builds. Increasingly, a lot of companies say they would rather have a new build. So we want to have a portfolio of site opportunities. Brownfield sites of multiple sizes, greenfield sites of multiple sizes. And so we do both. We are actively monitoring. We work very closely to make sure that people can utilize our brownfield program. In fact, our transformational brownfield program is a program that has revitalized opportunities in places like from Pittsburgh to Southfield to other places. So we have a portfolio approach. We're just happening here, the basis of this hearing, to talk about a greenfield site, but we're always actively monitoring and marketing our brownfield sites.
Yeah, and there's actually a couple really good examples in this region. Buick City and Flint is a site that we have supported through various programming, including, Act 381 TIF recapture and others. And in fact, the SSRP funding I alluded to earlier that came through a supplemental, portions of that were used to support brownfield redevelopment with no end user, Buick City being one of them, the Lansing former GM facility being another. So to Quentin's point is every project is unique. Every project has unique characteristics. Some need greenfield, some don't, but we're actively trying to put these brownfield sites back into use. And
So do you plan on doing any type of audit review of how this went sideways? And I know you want to blame the federal government or that, but I don't necessarily believe that's true. But
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would say is we always do a postmortem. And, I think it's not productive, at least I don't find it productive to cast blame. I would say that there was a confluence of factors. One, there is an uncertain global environment. Some of it's driven by trade policy. Some of it's driven by things that are happening in the sector itself. I mean, there is overcapacity. We've seen a pause of the fab development in Ohio. We've seen a slowing of construction of fabs in Arizona. But having said that, as we can see, there remains a federal priority on semiconductors. So we know that as we continue, whether it's through generative AI or other machine learning, we're going to need chips. And we want to make sure that we have a fabrication facility that can add into the semiconductor ecosystem we have here in Michigan. We have, it was alluded to earlier, a company like Hemlock Semiconductor that provides the polysilicon.
Right,
We have SK Cibtron. We also have KLA that provides the testing equipment.
Okay.
The missing piece is the fab itself.
thank you.
I understand that there is some different reasons that there might be some economic uncertainty, and is it possible to say that some of that could be because of infrastructure, like our roads in our state, possibly whether or not we have reliable energy, workforce readiness? Are those some factors that also play into the economic decision companies make?
Those factors do play in it, but those were not cited by the company when they decided to make their decision.
yeah, I think what you saw is part of that incentive offer package included addressing some of those issues. One, there was a workforce component. That was to support the local workforce, to get folks ready down into like K-12 all the way up through. So yes, we recognize we need to make sure our workforce is ready and able. And then two, there was a need, certainly the roads immediately around the site needed some upgrading as well. So those are considerations that we had to look at.
And they probably also want assurance that they're going to get their taxpayer-funded assistance and that there's not going to be hiccups along the way with securing that funding that is trying to be promised to them as well. I'd imagine it would be part of it too.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, that's their, and they were, they met with legislators as well along this to talk about their project. I think nobody's under any illusion that this was a slam dunk done.
Sure.
We knew that we had to make the case for this project.
Okay. Moving on to another, we just have time for a couple more questions here. Mr. Messer, are you aware of an individual by the name of Alexis Wiley?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and her PR firm, Moment Strategies.
Yes, I am.
What involvement did they have in economic development projects in the state of Michigan recently?
As I understand it, Moment Strategies was consulted to provide counsel on on marketing. We talked about the need to aggressively market the Advanced Manufacturing District and other large sites across the state.
Did they help with marketing efforts to try to sell and pitch to the people of Michigan how these would be good economic opportunities for the taxpayers if these projects come to fruition?
I believe that they reached out to a diverse set of stakeholders. So I'm not sure exactly the specific question, but they were contracted by the MEDC to help with messaging about these large-scale sites and the opportunity that these large sites would make in order to make Michigan more competitive.
And how much funding did they get from MEDC?
I will have to get back to you. I don't have that number on the top of my head.
But taxpayers fund
I
MSF
don't-
and/or MEDC,
I
and then
don't
that
believe,
money's
no, I
used.
don't believe that taxpayer dollars, as you know, MEDC receives two sources of revenue, one through general corporations and then all through corporate
So
funds.
you used a different bucket of money that the MEDC gets for that marketing, or somebody might call propaganda efforts to promote such activities.
We use a different, I would contest the premise of your question using the language of propaganda, but we did use corporate dollars and not taxpayer dollars.
Okay. Next question from Representative Beerline.
I'll keep it really quick, and it's more technical in nature. Back to the money that has been allocated and spent, and there's still some of that money available. I think you mentioned that any property purchases have to be approved by the strategic fund or MEDC?
Yeah, that is correct. We have a very robust, I would say, closing process for each of the purchases. And so we have to ensure, for example, that the Michigan Strategic Fund ends up in that chain of title so that yeah, every single closing. And then we do have we have a weekly meeting with the Flint Genesee group on the activities at the site, including the demo work and things of that nature.
Is there a metrics that's used to determine how much over market value you're willing to go? So just a quick search of what's still for sale in the area. There's one listed at probably double value, and then a property listed for like $4 million. Who makes the determination on how much is too much to spend?
I would say that's both of the, probably mostly the Michigan Strategic Fund, because we have to make sure that this grant is managed to the budget. Now, I do want to make clear, nobody's being forced to sell their home within this. This is all voluntary, and the overlay district includes a lot of buffering that will protect anybody who remains. That was the forethought of the township to put that into place. So people are not required to sell their homes. And as Tyler mentioned earlier, each transaction is unique based on the needs of the homeowner or the property owner.
Just for clarity's sake, I am looking at my notes here, and it appears that there were $15,000 per month from the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. That would be the state department that the MEDC falls under. $15,000 per month was provided by Leo, it looks like, to Wiley and her firm.
I would have to, I don't know what you're looking at. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're looking at, but we certainly can get back to you on that.
Okay. And I guess just to conclude, I know we've talked about it already briefly today, and we've talked about it before about whether it's public or private purposes. With all this money coming in to whether it ends up benefiting SanDisk or another company in the community, you're supposed to have 2/3 support for appropriations from both the House and the Senate, the full chambers. Why do you think that it is reasonable to call this a public purpose and therefore not needing that 2/3 support?
I'll take the first pass at this question. So the legislature has declared in the enabling legislation here that economic diversification, creation of jobs is a public purpose. That's in the Enabling Act. Number two, none of these funds are appropriated for nothing, right? And so they go through a project or through a process in line with a statute, in line with program guidelines, subject to approval of a state body, and the state is getting good and valuable consideration in exchange for that through jobs, investments, community benefits, contributions, and other things. That's how that is a public purpose and not a direct appropriation to a private entity.
Okay, so this enabling legislation is not able to navigate and circumvent the Constitution. Any enabling legislation should be within the constructs or the bounds of the Michigan and the U.S. constitutions for the purposes of protecting the rights of the individual. So that is a very large reach to say that you can just pass legislation, enabling legislation, saying that you can do with it as you see fit. And then also that is an economic theory to say that this is the best use of the taxpayers' dollars, to compel them to confiscate their money and to spend it as you see fit, instead of letting the market run its course. So what I think that government would be wise to do, would be prudent to do, is to get out of the business of trying to interpret what is and what is not the best economic decisions for the state of Michigan, and let our communities, let our state, and let our people do what they do best, and that's provide for themselves and their family and make the decisions that they see fit, and not give it over to a quasi-public-private entity like the MEDC working in tandem with big corporations around America to try to tell us what's best for us. That's my concluding remarks, and I appreciate the two of you coming in to testify. All right. There being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.